ultimately, at the end of the day, if we can cold call and email the same, the person who's going to win is the person who understands how to prioritize their leads in their territory better.
I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create a life of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. We've got an incredible guest today, Eric from Tech Sales with Eric, which is now Tech Sales with Higher Levels. He's got an amazing YouTube channel that's about 10K followers. He's built Higher Levels, a business that's helping people start their SDR career at top companies and get promoted to account executive to launch their career in tech sales. Today, we're going to talk about his journey into tech sales, his motivation getting into tech sales, and how to think about using tech sales as a path to create an amazing life, and how to become a top performing SDR at a top company and get promoted to account executive. Make sure to stay for the whole conversation, take thorough notes, and share this video with more people who could benefit from the message. And make sure to check out Higher Levels as well on YouTube. Eric, thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah.
How you doing today?
Good, man. Good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
So let's dig into it. What was your motivation getting into tech sales originally? What was the backstory?
Yeah. So I was a former engineer and also previously a national team athlete. And when I went to, for me, like engineering was always something that it was just school. You know, I had a lot of things going on when I was in college and whatnot. And when I got to a professional engineering job, I realized pretty quickly it wasn't for me. And in particular, like, yeah, I just wanted a job where I could really control my financial upside and really be rewarded for the work that I did. So making a super long story short, I did that for about 3 years while also still competing internationally, which was way too much. And then I ended up taking a year off to play overseas. And when I came back, I switched over to tech sales. I've been in it now for about 5 years. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. And through that process, I realized, you know, it's obviously been a great change for me. But I started helping people basically for free that were, a lot of people are kind of on the fence about sales or think about that all the time. So really like the second year I was in tech sales, it was just on Reddit and other forums. I was helping people for free. And then I realized like I was seeing the same questions again and again, started making content, and yeah, here we are. So that's the 90-second elevator pitch, I guess.
Damn, I'm sold.
Yeah.
I love that you were on Reddit helping people for free, and it bloomed into now a full-blown business in addition to you being in a sales role at a top company working with some of the biggest companies in the world. Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's amazing that you're playing this juggling act and crushing it as a seller and helping a lot of people do the same. So at what point were you inspired to start Higher Levels? And like, what was that journey like creating Higher Levels? What did it look like?
Yeah, and big shout out to my business partner, Chris, who does a lot behind the scenes. He's been on the channel more and more, but I mean, he's been enormous, and like all shout out to him for our digital presence. Really, it started, you know, like I said, I was roughly helping people for about a year on Reddit and friends and other, you know, engineers I knew that wanted to break in. And then as I just saw that, you know, we had the idea to start making a YouTube channel. I wouldn't even say that we had this grand vision of selling courses. But then over time, the videos started doing well. People started asking me all the time in the comments, like, hey, do you do coaching? Can I connect with you? And I'm sure as you've seen as well, you start to do that. And then it becomes very unscalable. And all of a sudden you've got 3 calls booked on a Saturday. And it's like, you can't do that every Saturday throughout the entire year, you know? And so at that point, I would say roughly a year into making videos, we really transitioned our focus to trying to make a course and community because we saw a lot of it taking off. And, you know, we thought we had a differentiated and unique angle, both still working in it at public tech companies. And yeah, it's kind of blossomed to higherlevels.com where it is now. And it's been insane, especially the last 5 to 6 months, how much we've grown. So
what inspired the name Higher Levels? Because I love the name. I just love what's the story behind it.
Yeah, it's actually, so my business partner, Chris, actually owns the domain higherlevels.com. He got that on a past venture, and it's actually like a very valuable domain. But I think it's really cool. It just encapsulates, you know, kind of what we're trying to do. Obviously, you know, reaching higher levels. And I think simultaneously striving for that, but also recognizing there's always a next level. So really just focused on putting in the work. And yeah, I think it's really played to our brand and community. We've got a lot of killers in our community, but they're striving for the next thing, and they're not the ones beating their chest telling everyone how great they are. They're really trying to improve and take that long-term focus on their career. So
I imagine one of the benefits of joining your community is getting access to other folks who are on the same journey that are going to elevate them and push them to be successful. So in addition to getting, the answers to the test on how to succeed in breaking in and moving from SDR to account executive, is it a pretty strong community of people that you've got going?
Yeah, it's been great. Right now we have 2 offerings and we're going to have a third. We have one that helps people break in, and then we have another cohort, which is our SDR Accelerator, and we're working with folks at AWS, Snowflake, Outreach, Brex, some really great companies, and absolutely. That's been one of the coolest things, like with our entry-level course to break in. I very much enjoy the coaching, and I'm very active on those calls. And what's cool on the SDR side is, yes, I'll give in input here and there, but oftentimes I'm taking a back seat because, we just had 2 folks promote to AE at Outreach. We had another guy go from Zoom Info to AWS, and we'll get into a call and I'll give my 2 cents. And next thing you know, it's like for the next 30 minutes, all of our students are trading tips. Wow. Hey, we ran a Salesforce report on this type of lead and we actually found it helped us a ton. And then everyone's sharing notes, and yeah, it's been awesome to see. We actually just had a guy that was the MVP at Brex this year as well. So it's been really cool.
You really do have some killers, as you said, in that community. That community piece is very valuable.
Yeah.
So when someone's looking to get into tech sales, they could just say, I want to get a job and make $60K. I want to make 6 figures. But it helps to have a broader vision, doesn't it? And be more strategic about how you're going to use tech sales to empower your life and what you really want to do in terms of getting to higher levels. So how do you think about the mindset of breaking into tech sales?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see a lot of peers around me that started at the same time I did. For me, I had a very clear vision as to why I wanted to get into it. And it's not, anytime I overplan whatever it is that I want, it never goes to plan. So, it's not like I'm planning down to the detail. But for me, I really did not enjoy my engineering career. And I think I had a ton of clarity coming into the career. And I've seen a lot of people that, I think maybe they got this job right out of school or whatever it might be, and they do really well. But then there's also this kind of inflection point in people's career where maybe they have a couple $100,000 in the bank, and then it's like, your needs are met. Now I guess I'm going to do this for 10 years. And I see a lot of people lose a lot of steam. So for me, it's always been, I obviously have entrepreneurial desires, and that's why I wanted to get into a sales-based career. But I've also since gone on, to use the free time I have to try and build what we're building on the side as well. So anyway, all that to say to your original question, I think I see a lot of people that get into it, get super excited, and then, kind of lose that steam because there's no vision beyond it, whether it's, becoming a VP of sales and actually committing to it and wanting to do it, not just talk about it with your buddies. Or as an example, if you're using sales as a means to start a business beyond that, what that means is you're going to work on it every single weekend for multiple years until you see any type of outcome or reward for it. And I think a lot of people will chip away at something here or there and not really give it their all. And yeah, so anyway, I think the mindset's absolutely important, and you just have to understand and compartmentalize and get what you can out of it, and respect the fact that it's creating a lot of opportunities for you. So
I really respect that you've used this path to also empower yourself in entrepreneurship, and that you're working weekends to help more people break into tech sales and grow their careers. So tip the cap to you, man, for your grind. It's inspiring. And we're going to talk about how to get promoted from SDR to AE and really crush that SDR role and move up the ranks in tech sales. I have to ask you just one quick high level question, pun intended, on breaking into tech sales. Maybe 1 or 2 points on the most impactful things to focus on when breaking into tech sales with no experience. Then we'll move to SDR to AE.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is a lot of people want to jump the gun and they think that, what is a salesperson? And they think it's an energetic person who's and it really breaks down quickly. They have no idea. So I think a lot of people don't spend enough time just fundamentally understanding what an SDR is, how it fits into an organization, looking at, good types of messaging and just getting your bearings.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people I've seen, and something we were talking about before we started recording, are just very unfocused. And it feels like progress because you're getting input from all these different things. But what it translates to when you're applying is, you apply to one company and you spend all this time and energy, and then you get rejected. And because you've taken so many inputs, you're like, wait, maybe I did this wrong. And then you completely rip up something that, had you just kept building upon it, would have gotten even better and even sharper. And you're just starting over every single time. So if there's one thing, it's focus. Obviously there's so much to unpack there, but I think that's the biggest thing is people get so they make it this huge beast, and they just don't break it down into its smallest parts of what they need to do to actually be successful and break in. So
Yeah. I love that idea of focusing on understanding the purpose of the SDR role in business. And you can show a hiring manager, I know exactly what I'm getting into. I know what the business expects of me to help set meetings, generate pipeline that ultimately leads to more revenue. And I'm willing to pick up the phone. And a part of focus too, I imagine, is, you want to focus on being a good interviewer and selling yourself in that process. And that's a whole can of worms though. So the key takeaway I have is be focused in your journey and don't take inputs from like everyone.
Well, define the problem you're trying to solve. I think a lot of people just jump to the conclusion and they think, oh, I'm going to apply for a job, so let me do this and let me, I've never written an email, but just be confident, fake it till you make it. And if you actually just kind of slowed down, understood it a little bit more, and just put in an extra weekend of research, you'd be in so much of a better place. And I think people just kind of shoot from the hip. They get too anxious. They don't just focus. So to all your points, for sure.
I mean, what I would do is just enroll with higher levels, and then I'd get the answers to the test and be able to focus and get the support from Eric and team. So boom, there you go. A shameless plug that isn't shameless because it's a great program. So let's talk about the purpose of the SDR role. So we're going to talk about crushing the SDR role and getting promoted to AE. And I think it helps with understanding like what it's all about and where it fits into the business, and then KPIs and going from there.
Yeah, I think the biggest differentiation we saw when, like I said, like when I started the YouTube, to be honest, the original goal was to just basically give out advice for free. And then, like I said, it's like people hit you up for coaching.
Yeah.
And naturally, it's like you find the best way to serve people to truly go in depth is, fortunately or unfortunately, you have to, put a paywall around it and really allow yourself to focus on the top 10% that really want to go after it. To your point on, I think the difference in approach that we saw with the SDR role is, cold calling advice, emailing advice, LinkedIn messaging advice, optimizing your subject line advice. There's tons of it out there. And I'm not even saying that it's bad, right? But it goes back to that original point of focus. I see so many people that are like, let me try this or let me try this. And if you had actually just picked one thing and tried it long enough, you would actually be able to iterate successfully. But if you're trying something on Monday and then by Wednesday, you've completely rewritten what you're doing or you've changed your cold call script. Anyway, all that to say, it's like really where we emphasize, and what I think is often lost today in a lot of the tech sales advice, is really strategically planning your territory. And for instance, what I mean is a lot of people don't put thought into what types of leads are the highest converting, right? It's like, how many times can you optimize your cold call script or email, right? And at the end of the day, you may catch the CTO of a company and he might be at the doctor's office or he might be in the office, and you literally can't control that situation. So how much more is optimizing your cold call and email really going to help you? And we definitely cover that, don't get me wrong. But I think what's often lost is strategically planning your territory, looking at, for instance, not just your inbound leads versus outbound leads, because obviously inbound leads will convert higher than outbound, but then breaking it down within that. And a very simple analogy is like someone who comes in and requests pricing is obviously very interested in what you're doing, right? And so you would drop anything to like go after that lead. But I don't see SDRs spending time beyond that and really breaking it down in terms of lead types. For example, your company maybe has 10 different white papers, right? But maybe there's 2 of them. And in my first job, there was a scaling white paper that we had that really talked a lot about ultimately what would be our paid features. And so, for instance, I found over time by focusing on our scaling white paper and one other white paper compared to the other 20 that we had in our company, those leads were almost always way more receptive to talking, because if they're looking into how to scale their database, as an example, they clearly are facing a challenge and cannot scale their database, right? And I think, so it's really breaking your territory down in a lot of detail, and then where you can, putting in the automation, the sequences, the structures to make sure that you've automated a lot of the low priority and low potential leads, and you're giving yourself as much time as possible to really focus on the highest value leads. And so again, just in summary, it's like all things equal, if you are a great cold caller and you are a great emailer, and you are as well, and we're competing against each other, ultimately, at the end of the day, if we can cold call and email the same, the person who's going to win is the person who understands how to prioritize their leads and their territory better. So I think, there's so much we could break down. I mean, that's probably a multi-episode podcast.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Let's break that down a little more in terms of some factors that we want to focus on to prioritize leads. What tells us that one lead is better than another? I'm going to volunteer an idea that in my business, in my current sales role, I'll look at spend potential based on certain things I know. Like if I see a SaaS company that has a certain amount of VC funding and they're a certain stage, Series B or C, and I see a certain number of like revenue, I might have an indication that, shoot, they might spend a crap ton on cloud, and I'm like in cloud sales, right? And so that I can use some of those metrics to prioritize that, like, this is a better lead than like a seed stage startup that's barely got any traction in the market. That's just like one example, but like, what are some of the key things you focus on for prioritization?
Yeah.
And it depends business to business, by the way.
Totally.
But,
and it also depends inbound versus outbound. You know, I would say in general, what we encourage our students to do is start with the inbound. In terms of what signals are better than others, it's hard to say per se. But I think over time, you know, when you get 3 to 6 months in the role, if you've actually put the time to really track that, and again, this isn't super sophisticated. We're not asking you to like make your own, you know, dashboard and all this stuff. But if you actually just put some time and attention to the leads you're handling on an inbound side, over 3 to 6 months, we see people get so much more efficient because they've really optimized that. And then to your point, you can kind of take, it's a combination of analytical and like intuition, if you will, right? Because again, once you've gone through that process on the inbound side and you've started to get a sense for what types of leads and white papers and webinars and all of these things convert higher than average, then when you go to the outbound side, there's many things to your point, like the stage of a company. Did they just get funding? Are there public announcements on what they're doing? Yes. What kind of gaps can you find in their 10K, especially now with ChatGPT being able to summarize all these different things? And then, you know, obviously outbound in general is lower converting than inbound. So once you've kind of really put that infrastructure in place, you can then map it. And you've really got to ask yourself, depending on, you know, we are supporting people that are selling cloud infrastructure, fintech, all of these different things. So based on your industry, what are those key triggers? And oftentimes, I think when we are coaching and working with our students, it's not necessarily giving them the answer. It's giving them the ability to ask the right questions. Ooh, like we will give you what has worked for me in the database world and in the IT world, right? But if you're selling something adjacent, or you're, you know, I've cut my teeth at small and mid-sized companies, but if you're working at a behemoth like Amazon, here's what worked for me. But here's the types of questions I would ask if I was working at your company. How would I identify this? What have you seen? You know, what are the top performers at your company also seeing? And I think that's the biggest thing, you know, to make a really cheesy analogy, it's like teach someone to fish, right? Versus, but I think that's the biggest thing that's often lost today is everyone wants to say, do this and it'll increase your open rate. It's like, well, how, you know, fundamentally, let's take a step back. Why would that increase in open rate? How would you replicate that? If the customer was this type of customer or prospect, what would work for them? Would you change it, right? And these are the things that I think we just help people guide through. And, you know, sales is very stressful and you're often held, you know, gun to your head, you better perform. Yeah. And I think sometimes that pressure to perform, you don't allow yourself the space to take a step back and really just more, you know, evaluate, check in, even on a weekly or monthly basis to really try and get smarter over time versus just running through a wall and then, you know, working 12 hours a day to hit your quota, which is great. But if you do that for 6 years, you're, you know, not going to have a life and like, it's not sustainable. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love your focus on being curious to ask the right questions that you were, that Higher Levels teaches people how to fish. Give you the right questions that you can apply to any type of company context. Because a lot of companies are different. You're selling database, and I come from the database world as well. At Oracle, selling cloud infrastructure. You could be selling like so many different types of SaaS. Like at Google Cloud, I had Workspace. And obviously that's as simple as looking at how many employees does a company have. Like the larger employee size, the bigger the deal size. So I could say, maybe I'm going to focus on this company that has more employees because there's a huge upside. But then again, there might be a new leader who's like a compelling event that happened that might be open to change in the technology, or, you know, there's triggers. So I appreciate you walking us through some of the things to think about. And ultimately, the key takeaway from this interview so far is focus when it comes to breaking in, and then when it comes to getting in the role. And like focusing on the right target accounts. Isn't focus just a principle of success in life? I bet you've applied it in building higher levels as well.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, going back to well said, and obviously appreciate you, you know, having me on and let me kind of explain this in depth. Like, I think the biggest thing is, focus, and also it's just understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Because I think when a lot of people get into tech sales, I don't want to go the way of overcomplicating this or making this some more sophisticated than it has to be. But I think especially early on, it's exciting to be in a performance-based career. And I think, you know, especially when you're an early SDR, maybe you find that the cold call script that's finally working, or the email that's finally getting you those leads, and you just squeeze the crap out of it because it's the first thing that worked and like you think you figured it out, versus again creating the system that allows you over time to just assess the situation very quickly, fully understand what you're getting into, and then making the best decision because of that. And again, I don't want to get too caught up in that because it's not some magical deep science. It's just people just want to find that one thing, and it's just a little bit more complicated when you really get into it. So
yeah, no, I love your passion, your heart to help people, and your thoughtfulness behind what you've built. And you're giving people an operating system to get a job at a company, know how to navigate it, but then also be set up to navigate to other companies too, to maximize their career. And you've helped folks get into great companies, top companies, but then navigate to even better opportunities as well. You continue to support them, right?
Yeah, no, it's been great to see. And yeah, shout out to all of our students out there. That's by far the most exciting thing to see their results. But yeah, I mean, some case studies that come to mind. We had a student that was in the construction management industry doing project management, some sales, didn't go to college. They broke into ZoomInfo, and then within 3 months at ZoomInfo, they got poached by AWS, doubled their salary. Dude. They're making more than like many AEs that I know, and like shout out to them.
Dude, AWS pays well. Yeah, even their SDRs make like $100K plus. I mean, I don't even.
I won't say it for him, but yeah, he's doing very well, higher than that. And I mean, there's tons
with
of case
equity.
Studies. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Ooh.
And we have several students. And people at all places like Outreach, Snowflake. I mean, some of the ones that come to my mind, not leaving out all of the great students. Like we actually just this week had someone get a 93K job at Workiva.
Ooh, I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a personal trainer break into Snowflake.
Snowflake, dude, arguably the best data company out there.
Yeah, it's awesome. And
these are good names.
Yeah. And we had, even recently we had a mom who was in real estate for like 10 years, just kind of wanted to do something different, break in, and it's just super rewarding. And obviously, not to mention all the SDRs we're coaching as well. Like I mentioned at Brex, we had the #1 SDR there who just won MVP this year. And again, I say it as credit to them. I'm not really concerned about getting credit as like some guru or mastermind. Like it's just exciting to see how much they're helping each other as well. So yeah, it's just been awesome, man. It's been really cool.
I mean, that gets me pumped up, man. Like to see you helping people, again, not just land jobs at any company, but some of the best companies out there. Yeah. And not just coast at these best companies, but become top performers like this person who's #1 at Brex. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah. So, the best artists steal. We were talking about finding a cold call script, like not overanalyzing, but if you find one that works, cling to it and double down on it. And, there's certain like approaches and frameworks and principles that tend to work in sales. We talked about this offline, but, or before this conversation. Isn't it best to find a top performer and just kind of like steal what works for them or model after them? Like, what are your thoughts? Is that a key part of crushing the SDR role and getting set up to be promoted to AE?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, you bring up a really great point. Credit to all the advice out there. I mean, there's way more sales advice on YouTube, on LinkedIn than there was when I broke in like 2020-ish.
Yeah.
And it's great. But I also think now there's so much. Like if I'm selling databases, I don't think you should listen to 80% of people out there. You should listen to people that worked at Oracle. You should listen to other people in a similar space to really get the most.
It's so different than like someone selling a SaaS to a sales team. Like you're selling to IT, a whole different beast. 100%. So very good point. Continue on.
And to be clear too, it's like if I was selling a sales tool to sales leaders, I would follow those people, and I would get most of my inspiration from them as well. Yeah. And so I think to your point though, I see a lot of SDRs come in and they're excited. They want to learn a ton. They want to promote really fast, which is great. But what that means is they're always, I think high performers have a tendency to also doubt themselves in the desire to continually improve. And so what that does is if you're not careful, you're taking advice from this manager or this SDR that's been there for 16 months, but you actually haven't looked at the leaderboard and they've always been a middle tier performer. Or, the account executive that's been at the company, for 5 years and they've been in sales for 20, but they haven't been an SDR for 18 years, And I think you got to pick and choose your battles and understand what you're trying to get out of the conversation. But yes, you should absolutely, I think that's the hardest thing for people to understand in sales. It feels really good when you're taking inputs because it feels like progress. But really, I think when you get 3 to 6 months in the role, you've really got to start to filter out all the advice you're getting and really focus on a small cohort of verified top performers, whether that's in your company, whether that's, friends working at other companies or online communities. that's where you're going to grow exponentially. But there is something to be said about taking advice from all different directions early on, because you have to understand what doesn't work to then understand what does. But I think as soon as you start getting momentum, as soon as you start to find someone that specifically helps you a lot in your career, you've got to double down on that. And unfortunately, what's hard to accept is sometimes that means you've got to tune out other people and not take in their advice. So yeah.
Good point. It's easy to want to go to everyone and parade around, especially at a new company, and talk to every person, regardless of whether they've delivered or not, and look at all the content creators and read all the books. But that can lead to analysis paralysis and just pull you in a lot of directions. And ultimately, I think one thing you were saying is you want to focus on the top performers or high performers and see what they're doing, and then execute on a strategy and then collect data, right, to see how it's doing. Like, do you feel like people, I don't know if we touched on this because we were talking about it before. I don't know if we touched on it in this conversation, but have you seen folks who like just shift their strategy constantly and they don't even get a chance to see like stick to one thing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, numerous different ways too, not only in cold calling and emailing, but a lot of ambitious SDRs too. They'll get 6 months into their role and they'll see someone that, is like 18 months at their company that hasn't been promoted yet. And all of a sudden they're like, there's no chance for promotion here. I'm just going to go to, I've got like Snowflake or AWS or whoever in my inbox. And sure, there may be good opportunities out there. But I think, again, aside from changing your cold call script every day, changing your email every week, like there's no way you're going to learn if you're changing it all the time. Like the best thing you can do on that front is find something that you think is working and shamelessly copy a top performing sequence. Like find the top performing SDR, become buddies with them, and just use what's working for them. And then over time, you can mold that into your own style. You can kind of adapt from there versus changing every week. But I think the other side of this too is more that career side where, I think a lot of ambitious SDRs want to get to AE as fast as possible. And you should strive to within, a year, 18 months. But if it's not happening at the 6-month mark, I see so many people that are like, oh, this small startup is, asking me to be their founding AE. And I'm like, whoa, like, let's pump the brakes here. Because if you go there and then don't do well, who's going to take you seriously as an AE in the first place, right? And so there's many things I could break down there, but absolutely, to your point.
Dude, I've heard stories of folks who took a risk with a startup and they're all excited and then it failed and they were screwed over and then they're a job hopper. All of a sudden they're hopping all these different startups and companies. There is such value in going to a top company, getting the training and support, building a network internally, proving out that you can deliver, getting promoted to AE, and then boom, it's like you have so much marketability and leverage to like then go to another company. And I'll share my experience, and I'm no guru. To your point earlier, like none of us are gurus here or experts. I don't have the perfect path, but what did work for me, Oracle for 3 years. I got promoted from SDR to AE. Inside sales though. A couple years there, I showed I could deliver 2 years in a row inside. Then I went to Google Cloud. I did get promoted to field sales. So I had 3 years at Oracle, 3 years at Google Cloud. Now I'm at a startup. It's been 3 years there of all things. For some reason, the number 3 has been good for me.
Yeah.
The point is, I just want your thoughts. Like, what's been your journey? And don't you think like it's valuable to not jump prematurely and actually prove yourself out over time?
Yeah, 100%. And I've had great experiences, and like honestly, the company I'm at now has been amazing. Like I really do see myself there for quite a long time, which I don't know that I felt that way before. But yeah, I would say like going back to an original point more on the prospecting side for an SDR or young AE that wants to take that next step, that's getting these questionable companies dangling like a 200K OTE in their inbox, and then all of a sudden your otherwise great job that's got you at 140 feels like a waste of time because you have 200 in your inbox, right? I think it's the
Dangerous.
same thing though. Oh, 100%.
Long-term thinking, man, is what I just think it's so important. But anyways.
Well, no, totally. And I think the process that you broke down as well, that's oftentimes what we have to sit down with students in the same way we have them ask the right questions about their territory in the first place. It's also the career. Because you see that next step and you're like, I can finally be an AE. I can finally make over 100K. Or maybe, again, to the point of like jumping to AWS, right? That can be a very good move. Don't get me wrong. But, if some questionable company's like, hey, you're an 80K SDR right now, and we want you to be our enterprise SDR lead for 130. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can finally make 6 figures. Oftentimes, if you slow them down, it's like, if you stay where you're at, you're basically going to get promoted to that in 3 months anyway, to an account executive position, making 130 plus as well. And now the outside world is going to look at your LinkedIn profile and say, wow, this person was so good they got promoted from SDR to AE. And oftentimes when you help students like think through their career progression, and you never want to do it just so it looks good for like the next recruiter or opportunity. But yeah, if you jump 6 months in and go to some startup and make 130K as an SDR, and that doesn't work out within 8 to 12 months, you've now been an SDR at 2 places in less than 2 years. And what are you going to do? Like apply to another SDR position, start the clock all over again? And I think a lot of people, and I say this because I've done this myself, a lot of people take for granted the great position you're in. If you're at a company and you're truly hitting quota, oftentimes the best thing you can do is like really assess how you can just get to the next level within your organization first. And only if, and really understand that, really exhaust that to every angle possible. And only if at that point there is nothing to do at that point, then you make a jump. And I found myself in that position earlier on in my career, and that's really the only time I had to make a jump. I also fell for the startup trap. I went to like a young and startup company that was all of these different things and didn't work out. But now I'm at a market leader at a public tech company. It's been great, and I've learned way more this year than I think I ever have in my career. So,
wow, that's so great to hear, man. And now you're an example of someone who could go to a startup and maybe it didn't work out, but be resilient and actually use it as a springboard to end up in the best situation you really could be in. So I'm curious, like, how did you navigate when things weren't going as well as you thought they would with the startup? Like, how did you navigate that to end up ultimately in this amazing position?
Yeah. I mean, I'll spare out details there. Just out of respect for everything, like shout out to that team for taking a chance. But basically,
Good point.
they built a new product and we're trying to take it to market and really wanted to be the first and thus market leader. And I think they just jumped the gun too soon. They had some quick wins early on, but there were a lot of issues with the product. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, objectively, again, when I found myself at that organization and was looking at how many things I was doing from a daily metric standpoint, how many, times I had different, demonstrations and proof of concepts with customers fail, at that point, objectively, I was able to look back and say, I am, working as hard, if not harder than my peers, and I'm not getting results, right? And no one was, I might add. So at that point, it was just an objective decision to move on. And yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to work out and be where I'm at now. So
I have someone in my network who navigated to a new company, and they have found that folks aren't hitting their numbers, and it's a tough environment, and the SDRs are being put on pips, I guess. And maybe you've seen that in the performance improvement plan that happens in sales. If we've been in sales long enough, we see at least like peers or folks that get put on these plans. This is kind of unexpected question, but like, do you have any thoughts on how to navigate that type of situation? Because one other thing I'll throw in, I've seen people like Jamal Raymer. He's the author of Mega Deal Secrets. I had him on the channel. He'd closed like $50 million deals at Oracle. He was fired twice for underperformance, actually. And so what's beautiful is there is hope that you can learn from failures and still bounce back and be successful. But do you have any thoughts on this type of scenario? I mean, when you're put in a...
Yeah, I mean, it's, fortunately, I can't think of any of our students that have been in that situation. And yeah, I haven't either, but I think, again, it's really just assessing the situation. Like, I've seen some pips where they truly want someone to improve. And I've had some colleagues that got pipped and it was like clearly impossible. And they were clearly trying to just legally,
I've seen that. I've seen that too. And this is crazy. A buddy of mine at Google Cloud, he's now at Databricks, so he landed a great company. He crushed his numbers and got put on a pip because his manager personally didn't like him. So that actually, it's a little bit of the ugly side of what could happen in tech sales. But anyways, so continue on. These are good thoughts.
No, I mean, all real points. I think one, if you do find yourself in that situation, it's just assess the situation. Is there a path out? Like, to be honest with you, unfortunately, if you're in that situation, I think you should probably hedge your bet and start interviewing.
Many times, Step one. It's designed for someone. It sucks, 100%. But to not hit it. But I have seen people, even at my own current company, that made it through. And actually, this one person, it's unbelievable, became our top performer. This is nuts. Yeah. So there is, but usually. Yeah, it's like, okay, I need to look at other opportunities, but
no, I mean, I think that's all it is like, it's obviously a very emotional situation. So you want to just try and objectively assess the best situation and how you get out of it, the best. And I think there's definitely something to be said. I've seen it, and I've seen it from my own athletic career in sales too. It's like you have a really great year, you get maybe a little overconfident in your abilities. Suddenly, you're confident you're going to get it done, and you're just not executing at the same high level that you were previously. So really assess the situation. Like, why do you think you got this? If you didn't get along with your manager, who's really at fault? Are you not a culture fit? Interview somewhere else, but maybe if there's things that you're doing or not being a contributor, those can be hard realizations. And to your point, I've seen turnarounds where people, have been low performers, and for whatever reason, whether it was something formal like a PIP that really woke them up to, hey, I need to be better, or just, getting confidence over time, building their own foundation up, that turned it around. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. But
what I love about this conversation is we're having a realistic look at an overall career in tech sales, how to navigate the journey. We're not just talking getting promoted, but even navigating going through a PIP, which could happen, or making a change to another company and thinking long term. So I feel like this conversation is very practical and useful to anyone out there that really wants to build long-term success and know how to navigate this journey. Yep. Now let's go back though to our core theme of getting promoted from SDR to AE. And there are 2 more points to tease the audience that I want to talk about. Like, hitting the numbers is foundational, and then building internal relationships to
big time
help get promoted. So we were talking before this, like, you got to hit the numbers foundationally to be in a position to get promoted. So anything you want to add beyond the points of prioritization and modeling after top performers and things like that are key to hitting the numbers?
Yeah, I think definitely the SDR to AE relationship, with the AEs you support. I think it's something, to me, to be honest, coming from the engineering background, I did a lot of things myself. I've always kind of scrapped to figure out how to make it work on my side, whether it's, working in college while playing sports and all these different things. But, so I think if there's any mistake I made as an SDR, it's not valuing those relationships enough. To your point though, before, you shouldn't treat that like its own little game you have to win. Like, first, you should actually get results, and then you have the right to try and like build relationships and build your brand. So don't try and like schmooze your way to having a great relationship while also not performing.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking you could have the great relationships, everyone loves you, but you're not doing shit. Excuse my French for in the role. It's like, this is a business. You're being paid to deliver outcomes. So now it could get you over the edge, having amazing relationships, but on its own, like, it's not going to do you anything if you're not hitting the numbers. So continue on with the numbers piece.
But I think, and again, like, it's not like you have to go an entire year hitting your number to just start that relationship. But, I think it's, really making a point to be humble and coming to your AEs and really helping them. And then also, again, going back to an earlier point on top performers too, like, for instance, let's say you support 5 AEs, right? As an example, when I was an SDR, I supported a lot of different account executives. I was at a fast growing startup and it changed all the time. And to be honest, what you realize over time is you'll have some AEs that come in out of nowhere and say, hey, I need you to hit these 10 accounts. And also, honestly, again, if you're delivering results, building a little bit of a healthy resistance to those people that are asking all the time and not giving you anything in return. So, finding top performing account executives that you can certainly learn from. Like, if you're helping them, of course they want to help you become an account executive. They're going to be willing, like, you're making them more money. They're going to be willing to put in a good word to your manager and all of these different things. But then again, kind of the underbelly and the uncomfortable part of this is on the backside. If you have a team of 5, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 that are like amazing and the people you really want to latch onto. And it's not that you don't serve the other 3, but if they're not willing to bring something to the table as well, so long as you're performing, you need to hold those boundaries and really like make that clear. And that's been actually a really interesting thing to see and kind of communicate with the students. And also credit to Chris, who is now at a fast growing company. And it's something that I think he does 10 times better than me, really focusing on those relationships. And it's really helped him, skyrocket his career as well.
So Chris, your business partner, does a great job of building his relationships with, in what role is he in currently, by the way?
So he's an account executive, and he's actually just changing roles, so I don't know if I can disclose it publicly.
Okay, sure.
But he's an account executive, and I think, even going back to his time when he first broke in after, his college career, he was also an athlete and all these different things.
Oh, cool.
He was able to just build a very strong internal brand, and that benefited him immensely. And I think I really took it for granted because I wanted to be the person that like ran through a wall and everyone knew if they told me they would give me something that I would do it and I would do it at a high level, but that's not sustainable over time. And that's not like a scalable model fundamentally. So I think, yeah, it's something I've had to learn kind of the harder way over time. But really, I think a lot of SDRs are in that situation where they don't value that and put enough emphasis on it as well. So,
are there any other things that Chris does that you've learned from that you might highlight in terms of how he markets himself internally or builds his brand or builds relationships?
Tons of things. I think the way he approaches his work, like he's much more systematized and analytical, I would say, than me.
Oh, really?
Whereas, like,
because I feel like you're very analytical and thoughtful yourself. So you're saying he's even a different level.
Yeah, I mean, he goes down to incredible detail and very much systematizes and borderline automates, a lot of the trivial work, I would say, to a much greater extent. But again, it's not that in of itself is getting him these great relationships. But again, what it does is by putting that in place, he's able to get much deeper and richer insights such that every conversation he's having with his peers at his company is very meaningful and valuable, So it's like anytime they're having a sales-focused or business-focused conversation, he comes to the table with tons of different insights that the average person in the organization is not even thinking about. So
what's an example of an insight? Is it, hey, this company, they just had this acquisition, and because of this reason, I think we might have this angle and like a reason for like doing a partnership, like we could bring value here. Is it like those types of insights or?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could be. I think, well, it's just consider the average conversation, right? And I'm not saying don't ever shoot the shit with your account executive or, get to know them on a personal level. But a lot of times it's like, I think over time, if you get in a good rhythm with an account executive or a peer or your manager or whoever it is internally, it's like you kind of just get in this rhythm and you're more or less like doing these one-on-ones kind of on autopilot, like, you good? Yep, you good? And you kind of just, it's like you're going through the motions.
How are the kids?
Yeah. And I think, it's really just putting attention to detail. And it's not even that there's like profound insights that no one's doing. It's just, I think over time, people naturally regress to the mean. They naturally get a little bit lazier, a little less crisp. Whereas if you're really thinking about, these things in a little bit of detail, putting the systems in place to have access to that information, then you always are in a great position to, where appropriate, provide those insights and value or cover someone's blind spots too. So yeah, it's like, it's not like every single conversation, like you're the person that has the insight that no one else does, but you're on top of things. And if, for instance, someone else is driving something and they're so busy that they maybe missed one or two key points, you can always backfill it. And they always, respect your insight because of it. So
it seems like you're mentioning that Chris has systems to gain insight and maybe save time. And I'm not sure if this is the case. I'm just asking, like, are there things that you see he does or that you've done or you see others do to be like particularly organized and to like be more efficient?
Yeah, I think, going back to, as an example, what we're building with the SDR Accelerator, and we have an AE course coming out in the future and community there as well.
Awesome.
I think it's a lot of people kind of get into a rhythm and you've got to pick your spots. But for instance, when you get into it, the hardest thing to do, let me put it this way. If you are like naturally pretty good at this, pretty intuitive, and you can figure it out and you can hit 100 to 150% of your number, the hardest thing in the world to do is actually sit down and try and systematize your work at that point. Because why would you change something if you're already exceeding your number, you're already making comfortable six figures? And I think that's the biggest thing is like, to your point of like systematizing, there's no one thing. But I think in the example of our SDR community, right, it's like having our students sit down and actually build out extensive reporting up front doesn't mean that you're working all the time and doing this every single week. Like once you do these things a couple of times and you actually know the right things to focus on and the right questions to ask, then it's a matter of, if you're going to ask this question every time when you approach an account, you could probably systematize it. Or if you're going to write more, like for instance, when you break down your territory into each individual lead type and the high performing lead types, your sequences and your emails and your cold call scripts are largely similar, but you can make, as an example, like 5 to 10 variants of sequences for that specific lead type. And while it takes a lot of work up front, now what you've done is basically, no matter, you could have 10 different lead types come in that day, and every single one of them feels like they're getting a personalized touch. And because you put in that extra couple of weeks on the front end, now you can do it on autopilot. And whereas your peers, as an example, in the example of an SDR, your peers are coming in every morning. They're saying, oh, what leads came in overnight? Okay, let me action them. Okay, and let's look up this person. They're a CTO. Okay, so they may care about this. So let me write a new custom email. Whereas like if you had actually put that infrastructure in place, it's not like you automate emails and just send 100% automated. But if you've got it down to the lead type, now you can quickly pop in and just modify a couple different lines. And that CTO, as an example, feels like they just got an incredibly personalized email, but you've just put yourself in a great position to do that very effectively and efficiently. So that's one example that comes to mind. I mean, there's so many more, but yeah.
Yeah, man, we're going to have future conversations. I can't wait to have you back on the pod, and we could go for hours, man, but this has been great, and we still got some more stuff to get to. So let's keep it rolling, baby. And so let's talk about once you get to account executive, you did it. You applied some of Eric's insights and tips to crush it. You're in your AE role. Talk a little bit about the transition. How do you set yourself up to hit the ground running in that role and manage that jump? Because it's a jump. You have more things you got to manage.
Yeah, I think, maybe at a principled level and then a tactical level.
Okay.
At more of the principled level, same things apply. Who are the top performers that have consistently been crushing it? How do you even go about, having those conversations to make those connections? Because you don't want to show up and be like, hey, like I'd love to pick your brain, and like you're clearly just trying to take from them with nothing in return. That's a whole conversation in of itself.
Good point. You want to like bring some value to them and be curious to contribute and not just be a taker. Yeah, is what I'm hearing.
But I think, especially now with tools like Gong and, all the recordings out there, I'm not going to make it sound simple. It's definitely a process, but I see a lot of SDRs like some of ours that just got promoted, and they're understandably nervous, but they've been doing cold calls, they've been doing everything they need to do, and then it's like they get to these discovery calls and like they're trying to make it like it's like Chinese, and like they have to learn a totally new language, and it's like, no, you've mostly been doing that, so one, find the top performers, see how they're running calls, and two, I think a lot of times, again, it goes back to knowing the right things. So, on a cold call, you're obviously trying to set a meeting. I think the biggest mistake new AEs make is sometimes, like, as you're going to talk to people that like just aren't a fit. Right? But the SDR's incentive is to get that meeting so they can retire quota like at all costs. Yeah. So you're willing, as an example, as an SDR to say, hey, look, I know it may not be a fit, but I think if we had, a 30-minute conversation, we could really assess it quickly. And if it's not a fit, no problem. Like, would you be open to meeting with the team? That person takes the meeting. I like
that line, by the way.
Yeah.
That's good.
But when you go to account executive, and we were actually having a conversation this week on our group call, it's like, there are some people that are not going to be a fit. And as an account executive, there's nothing you're going to say that's going to make them be like, oh, I believe, I'll buy. Like sometimes people are just not a fit and you need to move on. And I think
reminds me of my dating life. Sometimes I can't say the perfect line to get her. If there's not a fit, there's not a fit. No.
Yeah. And no, I mean, honestly, a great, probably separate episode altogether for sure. But no, I think like, the new AE wants to make everything work. And, in reality, you need to find the people that are most likely to buy. And certainly there's some, if you work at a reputable company, you're going to have some stuff fall into your lap sometimes. Let's be honest. But then
that's nice.
Yeah. But honestly, I think the top performing AE is not foundationally this crazy different human being that's super confident and well-spoken. They are just identifying the opportunities as they come in for what they are, whether it's like this person is very likely to buy, this person is not qualified and here's why, and I'm going to move on. And honestly, you may find that when you actually actively walk away from a prospect who you don't think is a fit, if they actually are in need, they will correct you and say like, no, actually I need this and here's why. Maybe I wasn't articulating it that way. Anyway, my point being, I think what AEs don't understand and just don't break down into its smallest parts is the best AEs out there are probably winning 10 to 15% more than the average AE. So there's a lot of loss in there. It's not like they're closing everything. Like if you have a lot of opportunities, the worst thing you can do is hang on to everything and try and make it work.
Yes.
Or when someone says, hey, reach out to me in 3 months, sure, put a reminder on your calendar, but like kill the op and move on. Don't even have it like floating in your pipeline, dude.
Yes.
I mean, so many things I could break down, but yeah.
No, what stands out in my mind is don't become a prisoner to hope.
Yeah.
You have hope. It's not a strategy. We know that phrase with a deal that you think, oh, maybe, but look reality in the mirror. I'm using all these metaphors. Like face the truth that it's probably not a deal. It's good, especially moving to AE, to have a healthy degree of pessimism. And sometimes I'd go to a customer like, I don't know if this makes sense, you know, or maybe you frame it differently, and you'll have them maybe explain to you why they might want to move forward, and they'll either qualify or disqualify themselves. But I just remember when I was at Google and I was an inside seller, and I had a mentor that was my field seller. And we're selling into Seattle, which was the competition's backyard, AWS and Azure. And the guy still led our territory to hit his number. And he went on to Harvard to get his MBA. Anyways, he's a smart guy. And he always said, Chris, let's celebrate disqualification.
Yeah.
You know, so, and it goes back to our theme of focus. You know, and so once we get to account executive, it's no longer let's get a meeting at all costs, using that smooth line that you shared. Let's qualify the opportunities that are actually going to move the needle. Now, one other thing I think about when it comes to crushing it as a AE is owning the sales process. Like you're going to have to navigate different steps of a journey and actually be prescriptive to the customer to show them that you've done this before and here are the 100%. Steps. And so do you want to riff on that a bit?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like owning the process?
Really well said. And I think it goes back to, again, SDRs that just promoted are not thinking, like, again, their sole incentive is almost always get the meeting, get them to the next call. And, you know, it's not that closing a deal is like this foundationally different thing again, but I think to your point, and that was really well said, it's like, okay, if we are not closing business on one call, what does that mean? And how do I drive an effective sales cycle? And I think people just get so anxious, they want to qualify it, and then they're not really thinking, like, if you spent 7 to 10 minutes before every call preparing, and knowing that, okay, if this is qualified, this is the next step. And just guiding them through that process. And obviously it's easy to sit here and, like, you know, preach from the mountaintop and make it sound like it's this simple thing. But I just see foundationally, it's like people are nervous to ask those questions. But again, I think if you have a really strong foundation and you know your product well, you run a good sales discovery and all of these different things, if a prospect is qualified, you have the right to ask to go into a POC. And if they say no, then maybe they're not qualified and maybe they're not your economic buyer, right? And there's many different things that you could do there, whether it's walk away or whether it's ask for, you know, if they're willing to bring other team members to the table. But I think that's the mindset over time you have to adopt, is like, I know my stuff. I'm going to run a very effective discovery call. And to be honest, if they are qualified and they're a fit and they're not willing to move forward, that tells me that they're not the person that's going to buy from me anyway. So then how do I address it from there, right? And I think a lot of, like, again, going back from that SDR that just wants to get that phone call, they just want to get that meeting on the calendar. When you're an AE, you've just got to objectively, you know, play the longer game, know that there's plenty of fish in the sea. You know, if you're working at a solid company with a lot of inbound leads or, you know, just a lot of brand recognition in the market, you've got to trust that over time it will average out, and it's better, to your point, to disqualify out. But again, just hearing that it's better to disqualify, like, out of context doesn't provide hopefully what that riff did in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you for the riff to give a little more nuance and context to the concept. Customers do like to know the next steps. They don't really, most of them don't know how to buy. They're looking to us as a trusted advisor to lead them through that journey. And so owning those next steps and getting those wins at each stage of the sales cycle is really important. And I think you mentioned this, but don't be afraid to let the customer correct you. And, you know, and that's totally cool. But one other aspect of being an AE that I've noticed in my roles at Oracle, Google Cloud, and now at my current company, which is like a consultancy helping service customers around how they use cloud platforms, is that I have solution architects, or we have customer engineers and technical resources and other resources. Don't you think that working with these other broader resources is an important skill set as an AE, like really being a quarterback? I want to know your experience.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's all a matter of, you know, I found ebbs and flows. Like because of my engineering background, I've naturally gravitated towards like very technical products. I think it's a unique advantage I have when it comes to selling and just understanding the persona I'm selling to. But yeah, I mean, like everything, there's a balance. I think it's really easy. I've seen periods in my career where I really prided myself on knowing the product and being super sharp. And I think that helps a lot at the SMB and maybe even the mid-market level, because oftentimes you're just 1 or 2 levels removed from the CTO. And if you know your product really well and can move fast, that really benefits you at these smaller to mid-sized companies. But then, yeah, as you get to the enterprise and more strategic side, it's a delicate balance. I don't know one answer, and we can continue to break this down. But yeah, absolutely. It's like there are sometimes I think at the SMB and mid-market level where it's better to use those sparingly and really focus on if they're willing to buy, versus like the enterprise and strategic deals where it's taking 9 to 18 to 24 months to close something.
Okay.
There is something to be said about building strategic relationships with solutions architects, getting them on a first name basis to the point where they've probably shared their phone numbers and are like texting each other here and there and all of that. So that's the framework with which I approach it. Yeah.
Good distinction. I've spent most of my time since I started at Oracle in that enterprise space. And so I realized that has been my experience. But as I've joined a startup, I have had more of a range of customers, including SMB. And to your point, I think it helps to take more ownership. And if you're technical, you are more mindful of how you engage other resources, and that can help you get deals done faster too.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I wanted to, as we wrap up the conversation, because I think we're approaching like the hour mark. I mean, time flies when you're having fun and learning a crap ton. This has been amazing. I chose crap ton instead of shit ton. But, we speak French here. We can cuss. But let's finish up by talking about the world of being an AE and the possibilities. There's different business segments, and maybe someone might go from SDR to SMB, account executive, and maybe work their way up to mid-market. There's corporate, there's enterprise, right? Where you can make like 7 figures. Some folks make 7 figures a year. So walk us through the different tiers and some of the differences.
Yeah. I think, my first experience, the first company I was at, won President's Club 2 years in a row, was doing great. And like I said, I really prided myself on being that kind of like jack of all trades, one-stop shop for most stuff. And to a fault, I would say. I got to the point where I didn't really want to bring in my solutions consultants as much. I was like, I can do this, I can run it with this and whatnot. And I think it worked well, again, on that smaller business side. But I think definitely, in particular this year, I've worked around so many great leaders on the enterprise and strategic space with 10, 20 years of experience. Yeah, it kind of goes back to that SDR to AE transition. When you are the know-it-all and can run really fast, that's great in a 2 to 4 month deal cycle. But like I said, when you're getting to these 18 to 24 month deal cycles, who cares that you're like, your stuff and like you're the smartest, quote unquote, like most product knowledgeable sales rep? There's so much more that goes into it. And I think it actually hurts you. Like if you're, and to be honest, like a point of pride and like fault on my end, I was almost like excited about how much I knew the product when I was at these SMB and mid-market levels, and then blindsided when I went to the enterprise side to make it oversimplified that no one really gave a shit, Like no one cared that like, oh, you have that feature? Cool. And then it's like a couple of those moments happened, and again, way oversimplified version that it made me understand like, oh, wow, like this is a total, like I shouldn't even be engaging in this level of conversation to where I need to bring in and foster that solution architect level, collaboration with these more strategic accounts and get out of my own way, and really focus on the dynamics at play. And, again, maybe another angle of this, and summarizing, I would say more of like the strictly sales methodology or process that I took for granted and just didn't even think about. When you're selling to these smaller accounts, you're 1 or 2 tiers away from the leadership team, whether it's the CTO, the CEO, who's ultimately buying. And again, if you're a really sharp rep at these SMB levels, they're like, hey, this company's great. This rep is on their stuff. Like, I promise you this won't be a wasted call. And you get in front of that CTO rather quickly if you're on top of your game. But now when you're selling, to some of the largest banks in the world or some of these huge companies, you're trying to sell to a director that has 8 to 12 people above them before we even get to the C-suite and executive levels. And so now it's not just selling to that one person, it's building a technical champion below them that's on their team while also balancing now this director that has 8 to 12 levels above them that has to ask for budget from those levels above them. They are also competing horizontally against the 50 directors at the bank that also have their own agenda, their own priorities, that also want to promote to managing director and all of these different things. And you have to equip the technical champion that convinces the director that they're actually going to build this and actually going to get a tangible result. You have to convince that director that this budget that they're going to die on a hill for is going to make their team look like one of the top 5% teams in the entire company. And then from there, there's so much more that goes into it in terms of like going up, talking to different teams who may have a vested interest in your technology. Like, yeah, so I say this not like I know it all. I'm hopefully helping to define the problem. Like, I've been humbled by how much of a different game it is from being 2 levels away from the CTO to being like 15 levels removed from the executive assistant of the CIO's office of that one team at the bank. You know, so it's way different.
Dude, you're getting me fired up. I love your passion, and this is so insightful to the folks who want to work with the whales, the big enterprise companies. And y'all, Eric is working with the biggest banks in the country and maybe world in his current role. You're a real world seller still as you continue to grow your community higher levels. So that's one thing I think that brings a lot of credibility to what you're doing to help people, is that you're in action on the court, in the arena. And I'm curious, now that you're selling at the highest levels of these monster enterprises, are there any other aspects of selling in this space that excite you? Like, have you found that, like, because you've experienced SMB in the smaller levels, is this the place that you enjoy selling the most?
I think right now I love it because it's like a new challenge, and I'm not even going to say that I've like mastered the SMB and mid-market side, right? But I had 2 years in a row of like well over my quota, President's Club, top rep, all these different things. And now really deep diving on the enterprise and strategic side, I'm very stimulated by it because I don't feel like, to be honest, there's a big part of me that feels inadequate, right? Like I'm starting to get results, and I've been at my current company for a year, and it's, you know, every quarter has gone better and better, and it's going really well, and I'm very fortunate for it. But I think that's why it's very stimulating, is because it's such a different challenge. And to be honest, I feel like I have a long way to go. Whereas like I definitely, you know, to some of the earlier points we talked about on the SMB and mid-market side, it's not like the best salesperson ever, but I definitely got comfortable, if I'm being honest. Like I definitely let my guard down, and I was still performing, but I don't, you know, I kind of took my foot off the gas because I got to a place where I had that really dialed in and locked in. And now, while it is frustrating and can be very challenging, I very much enjoy it because I feel like I've barely breached the surface, and like, yeah, you know, it's all new types of highs and lows, and it's like just understanding what those are in the first place, I think has added a skill set that 2 years ago I had no idea I would have. So it's been good.
It just comes back to our theme of getting to higher levels, you know, and you are going through that in your own experience. You're breaking through to a whole nother level, selling at the highest level in enterprise sales. You're helping people break it through to higher levels in their career, getting in the SDR role, breaking into tech and getting promoted and launching their trajectory in tech sales. And a part of getting to higher levels, in my experience, is breaking through the invisible barriers that we have internally, you know, our mindset and maybe limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome. That is so normal. Like when I was at Google Cloud, like talk about imposter syndrome. And I experienced it in many other aspects of my life when making a change or going to a new level. So I'm curious, this is a little bit of a personal question. Like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome or, you know, self-doubt as it pops up as you break through to new levels?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big component of this that is like failure a lot, you know, not to be cliched and stereotypical, but I think, you know, one thing that, you know, we didn't have a chance to dive into is like when I was an engineer and I was still playing for Team USA at the same time, like I was barely scrapping to like stay on the roster and balancing. And I had a lot of teammates that also, when you're on a non-popular sport in the US, like team handball, you know, you can't really make a financial career out of that alone.
Yes.
So, you know, balancing work and that was really difficult. I decided in 2019 to just take a year off, and I knew it would probably be my last year or two playing the sport, but I was like, let me just give it one last hurrah and we'll see what happens. And ultimately there's indoor team handball and beach handball. I ended up not making the roster for the Olympic qualifier for the indoor team, which sucked. But at the end of the day, like I remember, you know, the morning I basically found out and I felt like shit for like 4 hours. And then I thought back to when I was an engineer and I was bored out of my mind. I knew that this job wasn't what I wanted to do long term. I knew that I was just hanging on to it to pay off my student loans, and I hated it. And I was like, you know what? Even though I didn't achieve this goal right now, I am still better off than I would have been if I played it safe and had just been an engineer and just refreshed my Wealthfront dashboard and looked at my net worth go up $50 a day and been bored out of my mind. And then also on top of that, a couple of months later, I ended up getting and making the cut to play in the World Championships for beach handball. And that was rather unexpected. I wasn't sure how it was going to play out. But I think that has equipped me so well for sales. And like for anyone out there, it's like, again, I never want to like be a brand as like a guru or anything like that. It's like half of this game, if you're playing it for a 10 plus year horizon, is learning how to fail well. But also on top of that, it's like actually committing and trying something hard enough. And if you fail, having to accept the fact that you failed. Because I think that was a big problem when I was younger. I would hedge my bet it was cool to be an engineer and play for Team USA at the same time. And part of that was like, I wasn't willing to go all in. And it was cooler to be like this guy who was doing all of these different things, but not committing all in on one thing with the pure risk that I failed. And then that ended up happening, at least on the indoor side. I didn't, get the result that I wanted, but it created new opportunities because of the fact that I was willing to do that. And yeah, so I mean, there's so much I could get into there, and I don't want it to be like a meta, like, TED Talky type of thing. But I think that's the biggest thing and why I'm still stimulated. Like, I've been very, very fortunate. I love where I work now. There's been a ton of ups and downs with anyone, and like that is unavoidable.
Yes.
I never have wanted to paint a picture that it's all sunshines and roses. And like learning to fail in sales will prepare you for so many other things in life, and I don't think people expose themselves to that enough. But if you actually stick with it, you kind of get immune to it, and you really understand that 95% of your feelings about failure and inadequacy are, one, normal, and two, at the same time, like bullshit. And you just have to keep going and push yourself through it. So yeah, hopefully that helped. And yeah.
We're here for the TED Talk. It's inspiring. And my takeaway from you is commit, take massive action, and fail forward. Yeah. Face that failure. Find people to model after. Find support like higher levels in this case, particularly if you're looking to get into tech sales and grow your career. And I'm inspired, man. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for your time and the insight. Let's wrap up by talking about, higher levels, of course. And what are some of the unique aspects of the community? Like, who's it really for? And talk about the vision going forward.
Yeah. I think what's unique is we have a full, extensive, self-paced academy. So you can do that anytime. But also we've really put an emphasis on live weekly calls. So whether it's me, whether it's my co-founder, Chris, or other students we have that are very, very successful, there will always be a live coaching aspect to it. So that's something we really wanted to prioritize. And then certainly as we go up, the vision is, I think right now, we've really gotten a great groove with helping people break in. We've got, our first real cohort of SDRs has been incredible. They're awesome, and they've been doing some really great things. And so now we're kind of putting the systems in place there, and we're going to move up to an account executive course focused on SMB and mid-market sales.
Great.
Because I do think once you get to the enterprise level, it's so nuanced, and there's so much that goes into that I don't necessarily feel confident or good about selling a one-size-fits-all enterprise sales class. But I do think at the SMB and mid-market level, there's a lot you can do there. And then from there, we'll see where it goes. It's just the last 2 years have been insane. I feel very fortunate, and the most of all excited about the results we've gotten for students. Like the person I mentioned that was at Zoom Info and went to AWS, like they're gonna have a kid now, and I think they like just bought a house. Like that's the most exciting shit for me. So as long as we keep getting results, we're gonna keep building. We know we've got something good here, but keeping our heads down, not letting ourselves get overconfident, like we are the one-stop shop for everything, and really just hyper focused on people who want to become top performers and really impact their financial situation. So it's been exciting. We're just gonna keep building. So
I really respect what you're up to, the impact you're making, and what you've built. It's great stuff. And you have the proof points of all the folks who have succeeded at top companies and continue to grow in their career. So thank you for your time. And to the audience, thank you for your time and attention in this conversation. I hope you took notes. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you were inspired. Feel welcome to check out some of the links in the description of this video to check out Eric's channel. Eric, it's now tech sales with higher levels, right? See, I was because I was so used to tech sales with Eric.
Yeah,
but
no
tech
worries.
Sales with higher levels.
Yeah,
and check out the higher levels community. I encourage you guys to, if you're really committed to becoming a top performer, get involved. To your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living, and we'll see you in the next one.